Welcome into the Slobberknocker Sports Network. I'm your host, Coach Leak, and I am going to be breaking down everything from the Pacers-Knicks Game 2, as well as the entirety of the series. Before I get into the game and the breakdown, make sure if you like our content, subscribe to the channel, give this video a thumbs up, comment below what you think about this series, who you think is going to win it, what you think about the officiating. That's been a hot topic here. Also, check out our full sports podcast on this channel. We do a weekly podcast where we talk about everything in the sporting world. But let's dive into this Game 2 matchup where the Knicks take a 2-0 stronghold on this series. They win Game 2 130-121. When you look at the totals in these first two games, I think it's pretty surprising that the Knicks won both games based on how many points were scored, right? 238 and 251, respectively, in games 1 and 2. And I think if we saw those numbers, you would think the Pacers probably had a pretty good chance to win at least one of those two games. Both games went over the total by a pretty wide margin. These were high-scoring games between these two teams in the regular season, but the Pacers won that series 2-1. And when you look at this box score, it really is kind of astounding. It's honestly a bit concerning to Pacers fans because the Pacers shot 52% from the field. They shot 44% from three. They won the turnover battle. They won the offensive rebound battle, and they still lost by 9. So, looking at just that breakdown, that's not a good sign for Pacers fans on the surface because you win all those categories. That's a game you should win 100% of the time. And you add in the fact that Jalen Brunson didn't play for about 15 minutes in this game and finished with just 29 points. That's a big win as well, right? He had 43 in game 1. I believe it was 4 consecutive 40-point games. So not a good ending for the Pacers considering how it played out. There's some positives to take away we'll talk about, but I do think we should jump into this box score. And I think the place to start has to be the difference in this game. You think about that box score and you ask yourself, how did the Knicks win this one? And the key difference in this game was free throw shooting. And it wasn't on sheer number of attempts. The number of attempts wasn't a big difference. Really, it was not a difference at all. So the Knicks shot 22 free throws. The Pacers shot 17. But at the end of the game, Rick Carlisle got tossed, technical and another technical. So that was 2 free throws right there. That takes you down to 20. And then there was one intentional foul at the end of the game when the Knicks were up and the Pacers tried to foul to stop the clock. So if you factor out those 4 free throws, the free throw counts were 18 for the Knicks, 17 for the Pacers. Was not a difference, right? The difference was the Knicks shot 82% from the free throw line and the Pacers shot under 59%, right? Pacers were 10 of 17, Knicks were 18 of 22. That was the difference, right? Knicks score 8 more points at the free throw line. They win the game by 9. And it makes sense, right? We already talked about the shooting percentages. But then you look at it, I mentioned offensive rebounds. Pacers had a +2 advantage in offensive rebounds. They had 2 less turnovers than the Knicks. Points in the paint, 62-60 New York. So a 2-point difference, right? Nothing. Transition points, 10-9 Pacers. I mean, these are all right there. The Knicks did win the rebounding battle overall. They had, I believe, 10 more defensive rebounds than the Pacers, rather. So that was a factor, but the Pacers got more shots than the Knicks. So that was partially why. Looking at kind of the box score and the breakdown here, Halliburton had his best game of the playoffs. That's another negative if you're a Pacers fan, right? I mean, Halliburton was really, really efficient from the field. He was 11 of 17, I believe, from the floor, 7 of 11 from 3. He's not been good from an efficiency standpoint. He's not been good from really any standpoint in the playoffs as a whole. I know he hit that one game winner against Milwaukee in, I believe, game 3. But, looking at the box score, you get Halliburton going for 34, and then you get Obi Toppin going for 20, which is just probably not going to happen very often, and you still lose by 9. Once again, why did that happen? Well, Miles Turner and Siakam had really, really poor outings last night. specifically Miles Turner, who's been maybe the best player for the Pacers in these playoffs as a whole. Had multiple 20-point games, had a 29-point outing against Milwaukee in that series. He was 3 of 11 last night for 6 points. He was a minus 21 on the plus minus. Siakam wasn't awful by any means, but 14 points on 7 of 18 shooting, 0 for 3 from downtown. Just have to be better, right? Like if you're going to be a guy who's relied upon to be a top scorer for your team, and those two guys together combined for 10 for 29 from the field, it's not going to cut it, right? And the reason they were in the game was because Obi Toppin went 7 of 10 and had 20, and Tyrese Halliburton went, I correct myself, 11 of 19 from the floor with 34. The other thing that I think from a schematic standpoint we should discuss is TJ McConnell. McConnell's been really good in these playoffs as a whole, specifically in the last 3 games he's played. He had a 20-point outing against the Bucks in Game 6. He came out in Game 1, had 18 off the bench in like 22 minutes, and then last night had 10 and 12 assists in 23 minutes. So he's been really, really good. He's also been the guy who it seems gives Jalen Brunson at least somewhat of an issue defensively, because the Nembhard matchup is just not working, and they need to figure that out if they want to have a shot to come back in this series. Nembhard cannot guard Jalen Brunson. That is obvious from watching the tape. I went back and rewatched the game last night. He just has no shot. It's just not a fair matchup. Brunson is too skilled, too good. He can draw fouls. He gets into the paint. His mid-range is absolutely phenomenal. He's making threes. So Nembhard, I don't think you can keep Nembhard on Jalen Brunson. They tried doubling at the end of the game. That didn't work. Led to some wide open threes from Dante DiVincenzo, which is not the guy you want to be leaving open right now. And that's because you kind of just get in a scramble situation when you trap Brunson, because it's not like they're strategically trapping him. They're trapping him right when he comes across half court to get the ball out of his hands. And that means they're just going to swing the ball to the open man. There's an attack down the paint or a swing to the corner, and usually it's a late closeout for a wide open or pretty open three for a very good shooter who's extremely hot right now. And, I just think if I'm the Pacers and I'm Rick Carlisle, I have to look at the fact that McConnell is playing good right now. Playoffs are about adjustments, and I think that's an adjustment he needs to make. McConnell's coming out around the 8-minute mark in the fourth quarter and not going back in the game. And I believe when he came out in this one, they were up 1 or down 1 rather, and they ended up losing by 9. Halliburton was great down the stretch. He had some huge shots to keep him in it. But in game 1, McConnell was playing much better than Halliburton, right? Halliburton had just 6 points in the game. McConnell had 18. And instead of riding with the hot hand, he went back to Halliburton, and it probably cost him the game, if we're being honest. And one thing people don't talk about in terms of Tyrese Halliburton is he can be really lazy defensively. I watched the game last night on replay, and I froze and broke down some of the defensive possessions. He just falls asleep a lot of the time, ball watching, and gets back cut behind him, loses guys who are shooters. Essentially, this is a guy who I think people thought was a pretty good defender coming in the league. And the Knicks at the end of the game were trying to get him switched on to Brunson to exploit that matchup. That's a problem, right? So I think that's something that needs to be addressed. I would personally like to see both Halliburton for his offense and McConnell for his defense and his offense on the floor at the same time at the end of the game. The guy who I question being in the game is Aaron Nesmith. Why is Aaron Nesmith in the game? What has he done in these playoffs to warrant him playing in big moments? He shot the ball extremely poorly. He's not been great defensively. I mean, he basically has had the Dante DiVincenzo assignment for large portions of the game and gotten absolutely smoked. I watched, again, when I was breaking down the game last night, a lot of the defensive rotations that were breakdowns were on him, in no man's land, kind of caught in between help and staying home on shooters, and it puts the Pacers in a really bad position. And so that's the guy I would look to replace late in the game if I was going to go to TJ McConnell, or even, Obi Toppin was great last night, right? So you think about it, you look at Nesmith in the series, he's 2 of 8 from 3, 25%. on the playoffs, 14 of 47, under 30% from three. That's on the entire playoffs, right? That's a decent size sample at this point. It's not like, okay, he had a bad series one. Now he started shooting the ball well in series two. No, he's 25%. He's worse in the second series. From the field as a whole, 25 of 70 in the playoffs. Just not good enough. And then you look at his plus minus in the first two games of this series. It's just not worked out well. He's minus 16 game one, minus 19 in game two. And McConnell, on the other hand, has been a positive in both games. So it just, from every statistical standpoint, from every defensive standpoint, I think they need to go to McConnell in the fourth quarter. I think McConnell needs to play closer to 30 minutes, and I would decrease Nesmith's minutes to give McConnell more. I wouldn't take anyone else out of the lineup. I mean, you're not going to take Halliburton out of the lineup. You're not going to take anyone else out of that starting lineup. Maybe you could make an argument for Nembhard if he's having an off game, but I think he's played pretty well. Defensively, it's just not a fair matchup. I don't think you can really put that on him. He's playing hard. He's just not good enough defensively to hang with Brunson. The other interesting thing that I noticed from looking at the box scores the first two games, the entire starting lineup for the Pacers is a negative plus minus of at least -9 in both games. And the entire bench is a positive starting plus minus in both games. So it's really weird. The bench, from a plus minus standpoint, I'm not saying that plus minus is the end all be all. It's a pretty basic statistic, right? But right now, the bench is playing better in their minutes than the starters are. When the bench is on the floor, they're winning that time. When the starters are on the floor, they're getting beat by the Knicks. And the Knicks aren't playing that many guys, right? So it's not like you can argue, well, the bench guys are going up against the bench guys of the Knicks. The Knicks don't have any bench guys, right? I mean, and we'll touch on OG Anunoby in a second, but they're down to 6 dudes, really, right? And that includes Precious Achiuwa. There were 7 guys in the rotation last night, including Precious Achiuwa, who really wasn't in the lineup going into the playoffs. So you can't argue that they're just playing worse players or bench players. That's not the case. They're legitimately playing better than the starters. At least that's what the box score is telling us. That said, I do want to touch on the OG Anunoby injury. I think that's huge for the Knicks. I don't want to say they can't win this series without him, because up 2-0, they absolutely can. But if he were to not go the rest of the series, it's going to get real interesting. And I wonder how the Knicks are going to play game 3, because it's tomorrow, right? No real rest in between game 2 and 3. You got a travel day. You got guys playing 43, 44 plus minutes every night. Luckily, and I don't mean luckily Brunson got injured, but luckily Brunson got a 15-minute break by way of the injury in this game. So at least he played less minutes than normal last one. So that's a bonus. But I'm curious to see, does Tibbs just try to win game 3 and go all out and play everybody 48 minutes again? And that's just what they do? Or do they think, okay, let's see how long it's going to take Anunoby to get back. Let's try to win this game, but let's play some guys deeper into our bench, not overdo it, and then go for game 4 if we can't win game 3 with some of our deeper guys off the bench. I have a feeling that Tom Thibodeau is a guy who doesn't change what he does. I think he's probably going to do the same thing he did in games 1 and 2, maybe to even a higher extent now if Anunoby can't go. So we'll see how it plays out. But I will say that's a huge loss. I mean, he was phenomenal last night. When Brunson went out, he kept him in the game. You take OG Anunoby out of these playoffs, they don't get through round 1 against the Sixers, and they probably lose last night. So he's been huge for them. And DiVincenzo and Brunson carried them offensively last night. And when you're down to 7 guys and you lose a guy who's giving you 29 points, it's a big loss, especially against a Pacers team who goes 9 deep. So we'll see how that plays out. I hope for the Knicks' sake, Anunoby comes back. It's really unfortunate, all the injuries that have happened. I'm I'm not saying they're better without Randall, but I'm not a big Randall guy. I think that the lack of depth from his loss hurts them when they play a team like the Celtics, who is more talented than them. But from the standpoint of like these first two series, if you just had Randall out and had the rest of the team, I think the Knicks cruise into the conference finals. But with Bojan Bogdanovic out as well, Mitchell Robinson out, both of those guys done for the playoffs, and then you throw OG Anunoby in this mix, it's just almost becoming an unfair fight. You're asking Brunson, Hart, and DiVincenzo to score 30 each on a given night. You're going to need 40, 45 from Brunson, 30 from DiVincenzo, including like 5, 6, 7 threes. And then, Josh Hart's going to have to go off with Anunoby out of the game. So you're asking a lot of the Villanova big three. As far as game 3 goes, I think this is going to lean Pacers, right? Like, if the Pacers lose game 3, this is a sweep because they won't have much in the tank left game 4. If they can't beat the Knicks this shorthanded, it's going to be a mental barrier they can't get past. But I'm interested to see what adjustments Rick Carlisle makes. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think. Do you agree that TJ McConnell should be playing more minutes? If not, do you think they should keep the same lineup? What adjustments do you think the Pacers should make? On that same token, what do you think the Knicks should do in game 3 if OG can't go? Should they play deeper into their bench? Should they play their starters a bunch of minutes and try to win game 3 and end the series tomorrow night? Let me know in the comments. Again, please give this video a thumbs up. It helps us tremendously grow the channel, grow our brand, and subscribe if you're not. Turn on notifications. Every single Tuesday morning, we release a new full podcast, hour and a half. It's available on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon Music, all those major podcast platforms, and then with video, obviously, here on YouTube. So thank you guys for tuning into this recap and breakdown of Game 2 of the Pacers-Knicks series. Check out some of my other videos on this channel. I'll be doing a breakdown of some of the recaps of the games tonight between the Mavs and the Thunder and the Celtics and the Cavaliers. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys next time.